We go back to California for risk-focused policing out of the city of Redlands. And we have James Bierman and Derek Schott. Derek Schott is the recreation coordinator for the police department.
Good afternoon. Several years ago, the leadership of the Redlands Police Department determined that if we were going to truly honor our community's investment in public safety, we needed to rethink some basic assumptions about the role that we played in our community. As such, we determined that it was appropriate for us to think about developing a livable community by supporting strong families, resilient kids, and safe and sustainable neighborhoods. And we knew that as we re-engineered this orientation that we were lacking some things. We lacked a theoretical model on which to base not only our work but also the community's work. We looked around and found the seminal work of Drs. David Hawkins and Richard Catalano at the University of Washington, Seattle, a thing called risk and protective focused prevention. That posits the idea that there are things called risk factors in a community that place kids at risk for the adolescent problem behaviors of substance abuse, delinquency, violence, dropping out of school, and teen pregnancy, and that these risk factors are mitigated by things called protective factors. Risk factors exist in 4 domains: community, school, family, and peer groups. We also realized that if this was the kind of work that we wanted to do, we didn't have enough tools in our organizational toolbox. So we asked our city council to consolidate into the police department housing, recreation, and senior services. We have now an expanded toolbox to do the kind of work that we do. This is called risk-focused policing. What exactly is that? To acquire the risk and protective factor data from which to drive our decision-making, we worked in conjunction with our local school district to administer a survey validated to measure risk and protective factors in adolescent problem behaviors to 6th and 12th graders. The data from this survey was geocoded, and using sophisticated geographic information system software, we mapped the data at the census block level. This clearly identified those neighborhoods that had the most pronounced risk profiles. We produce and share these maps with the school district and a diverse group of community-based partners to support their own data-driven decision-making processes. We have re-engineered the police department to align our resources with the strategic purpose of reducing risk factors and enhancing protective factors. Now, specifically, we've redirected our housing programs to neighborhoods with elevated levels of the risk factor: low neighborhood attachment, community disorganization, otherwise known as blight, and high transitions and mobilities. That's the accelerated rates at which families change residence in a community. In the last 2 years, we've provided interest-free loans of up to $15,000 to 45 low-income families to transition them from renters to homeowners. Using the same loan structure, we've helped rehab almost 300 properties, almost all of those in challenged neighborhoods. We've developed after-school recreation programs at middle school sites and in neighborhoods with a high level of low neighborhood attachment. Last year, these programs served more than 8,000 young people. With drug asset seizure money, we funded a violence prevention conflict resolution program at a variety of elementary schools serving neighborhoods with elevated levels of the risk factor, early initiation of antisocial behavior. We also fund a bilingual parenting education program taught by police officers to address the risk factors of early initiation of antisocial behavior, parental attitudes favorable to the problem behavior, and friends who engage in problem behavior. Finally, we've reassigned a police officer full-time to our local drug court to work on the risk factor of family, history, or involvement with the problem behavior. This has resulted in a 70% increase in the client enrollment at the drug court, an increase in program retention, and a decrease in program recidivism. And to put a human face on this, I'd like to introduce Derek Schott, one of our program coordinators, who will tell you a little bit about the kids that we deal with.
This is scary. Okay. I've worked in recreation for 6 years. I've personally experienced the transformation of my role in the community through this program. My job no longer means just providing leisure activities for kids. It has a new goal and a clear sense of purpose. That purpose is to control crime before it occurs by focusing on risk factors while enhancing protective factors. And I love my work. In one program, we've taken our mobile recreation program to one challenged neighborhood where the risk factor, low neighborhood attachment, is elevated. We provide tutorial assistance, health screenings, along with crafts, snacks, and games. And once a week, we give them the feeling that their neighborhood is the most spacious place to be and live in Redlands. The best part of my program is when I receive a phone call like I did last week, where a teacher called me to let me know how the tutorial aspect of our program had helped a child in her class. Juan Sotelo, an 11-year-old participant in our Rec on Wheels program, had been having a rough time with his math and his English skills. This is common for us because most of our kids of our parents don't speak English. Juan's teacher had been noticing an improvement in these weak areas and asked Juan how he was able to make these improvements. Juan told her he had been receiving assistance from an officer Crane at our Rec on Wheels program and he had been spending hours with him making sure he understood his material. Juan benefits from this experience the same way many of our participants do. He gets to develop a relationship with a person he would not traditionally get to develop a relationship with, and that is a police officer. And I will tell you, it is an amazing sight when we go into these neighborhoods with 5 police cars, mobile communication bus, sirens on, lights flashing, and neighborhoods run out to greet us instead of running inside and locking their doors. Thank you.
So Derek, you're out there with these 5 police cars. You come rolling in. You like General MacArthur out there?
I drive the mobile communications bus.
What's that?
It looks good in the police car.
You drive the mobile. You have a basketball and you're just driving in there.
Well, actually, I drive the mobile communications bus. That's where we do our tutoring from, and it's actually just kind of set dormant in the police lot for every 2 years where they do a SWAT operation. So now we use it as an air-conditioned place to do our storytelling, to do our tutoring. You know, we use it. Exactly.
Lee Shore.
I think our committee understands the difference between risk factor profiling and racial profiling. I think we understand that what you're doing is targeting resources on high-risk areas and not targeting punitive interventions.
Absolutely.
What I want to know, and it follows up on what you were just talking about, does the community perceive it that way? I gather that if they're all rushing out to greet the police cars, that they have your intentions quite straight. But can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, I could just, from what I just told you, the reason I gave that example is because I did roll out there on the first day with the 5 cars and the mobile communication bus and had no one come out. So it was a thing where I had to go door to door and say, hey, we just want to play. Come on out. It's just a party. And everybody, so.
We're the police. We're here to play.
Exactly. So, and I mean, the combination between the police and the recreation gives us the option to have those tools like someone like me who doesn't obviously look like an officer and can kind of approach people on a different level, but the officers are there every day, and it's the symbol of them being in the neighborhood. It just gives a total different perception of what the police are going to do when they get to your neighborhood.
Well, Devin may want your job here any day now. Carl?
Chief, when you were describing the program, you said we make decisions regarding housing allocations, housing loans, various other allocations of public resources. Who do you mean by we? Is it the police department? Is it city government? To what extent is this police-driven? To what extent is it legislatively driven? To what extent is it mayoral-driven?
Sure.
Could you explain the allocation process
Absolutely.
a little bit more?
In Redlands, because housing services are consolidated in the police department, we view those as more than just bricks or mortar projects. You understand that we're about transforming troubled neighborhoods from places that they were to where they want to go. To us, that is all about a long-term strategic crime prevention strategy. We, being the police department and our housing specialists, using the risk factor data, where kids have told us with these anonymous confidential survey instruments that there's nothing in their neighborhood for them, or that their families move at an accelerated rate around the community, or that the community is disorganized through blight or other kinds of indicators. We target those on a priority basis using our redevelopment set-aside money. We're a consortium city, so our HUD money comes through the county and we partner and leverage our money there, and then we make decisions about where it's allocated based on the voluntary, obviously, application process of people in those neighborhoods. We go door to door and we advertise with the people, which is a very strange sight for people, I will acknowledge, having a cop and a housing person come to the door and say, we're here to give you $15,000 if you'll transition from renter to homeowner.
There's just one aspect of this. I don't. Did you mean to say that in Redlands, all housing funds in the city are allocated through the police department, or
That's
you
correct.
get a certain allocation of housing funds from elsewhere?
All of them. I'm also technically I'm the director of housing services and recreation services.
How
for the
big
city
a
of
community
Redlands.
is this?
70,000.
Susan?
I'm familiar with programs in other cities, Chief, that do something similar, where a troubled neighborhood will have police services and a coordinated approach from police and planning and Parks and Recreation and Housing and, you know, whatever other department, Public Works sometimes. So is what makes your program, I think I know the answer you're going to give, but I'll let you answer. What makes your program unique and sets it aside from some of these other programs that are going on in cities around the state?
I think a couple of aspects. Number one, we are driven by this research-based model. Risk and protective focused prevention is based on 20 years of longitudinal research into those kinds of things that contribute to adolescent problem behavior. So the data drives our decision-making. We're literally producing maps, sometimes they're 3D, sometimes they're one-dimensional, that tell us where the predominance of certain types of risk factors are. And we can look at those from different dynamics. So number one, it's research-based, and we aim for the reduction in those risk factors. The second part is, as I mentioned a minute ago, we don't define housing programs in our community as simply bricks and mortar projects. This is about long-term transformation of troubled neighborhoods and about long-term crime control. That's my business. Controlling crime before it occurs is what risk-focused policing purports to do. That's what we're attempting to do. And we do that in a wide variety of strategies, all based on this research and the different tools in our organizational toolbox that we've been able to connect.
And Derek, I know a lot of police officers over the last 20 years that do look like you.
That's what I told him. He looks
They're
like
the undercover guys.
yeah.
In fact, you're overdressed.
The time is up. We have two hands still in the air. Antonio and David Osmond.
Mine's very short or quick. What's the demographic profile of the 70,000 residents of Redlands?
25% Hispanic, a little under 75% white, and then about 3% other, whatever other constitutes.
David?
In your application, you've got a list of quantitative outcomes, which is pretty impressive, but it's an era when crime is falling everywhere, so one never knows what to make of it.
Sure.
You don't have to answer this now, but it'd be really helpful to me and perhaps the others on the committee if you gave us comparative data for these numbers, either for the state of California or for nearby communities with similar demographics, something that would put your statistics in context and tell us whether crime is dropping in your city and some of these neighborhoods faster than other cities and neighborhoods.
Well, if I could, the site visitor and I spent a tremendous amount of time talking about this. He's an extremely knowledgeable man. The notion of crime dropping and trying to grapple with why that's occurring in many places is very problematic. We're currently under an evaluation with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention to study this. They're very enthusiastic about it because it's the only policing model they're aware of that's focused on this. What we can say that is very suggestive about the drop in crime is in those areas where we have been applying these resources, crime has dropped at a higher level, 50% more than in those areas, the rest of town. Crime in Redlands is dropping like every place else. But when you try to equalize that with crime dropping across the United States, this can be very problematic, and I'm not sure I can provide you that data. I can tell you where we have applied those resources. It's dropped 50% more than it has in the rest of the city. And this is the worst part of our community. This is the toughest town under all kinds of transitional issues.
50% more than in the rest of your city.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Right.
50% more than the rest of the crime rate.
In the city.
That's right. Right. That's correct.
Gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you very much.